Welcome to Talking Feds One-on-One, deep dive discussions with national figures about the most fascinating and consequential issues defining our culture and shaping our lives. I'm your host, Harry Litman. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another one-on-one on Talking Feds. It falls to us now to do several tasks in the wake of Donald Trump's electoral victory, to use the law to preserve inroads and judgments of the last few years, to use the tools of history to try to get a sense of what happened, a process that could take decades, and to use the tools of politics to try to do our best to stave off the possibility of autocracy that seemed so looming in the prospect that's now been realized of his coming to power again. And no one better to talk about these joint tasks, especially the current political challenge, than Rick Wilson, a renowned political strategist, ad maker, writer, speaker, political commentator. He, of course, is the co-founder of the Lincoln Project, author of 2 New York Times bestsellers, but he has most famously in the last few years really poured his heart and soul and considerable political skill and experience into the effort to keep Donald Trump from returning to power, which makes last Tuesday, as for many of us, a day of real personal sting. I was really eager to be able to talk to him in the wake of where things stand a week out and the election itself, and he's here. Rick Wilson, thanks so much for joining.
Hey, Harry, thanks for having me on.
All right, I'd like this to be more about what is to be done than what went wrong, but they are connected. Let's focus on what we know in retrospect and acknowledge that always all the polls and frenetic predictions and punditry was always going to be imperfect. Let me just ask you, in gross, as you look at it now, was the election winnable for Harris and the Democrats, or whatever forces that drove the victory for Trump? Were they, in some real sense, indomitable, whether or not we knew it a few weeks out?
It was winnable. It was difficult. It was problematic. The economic headwinds were real. Those things were not things you could write off. And I think one of the things that everyone, and I'll put myself on this list included, is the hermetically sealed bubble that exists around the Republican base today and their media and social media platforms was not as penetrable as we had all hoped. You know, we started looking at the numbers of our performance metrics for Lincoln on election night. And we basically, in a lot of our target folks, we moved them. We did what we were supposed to do. We moved these moderate Republicans toward Harris, either to stay home or to vote for Harris. But we didn't do enough. And we could not have done enough, given, we spent $20 million this year. We raised 20 and spent 20 this year. And the folks we moved took that much to move. We didn't have $100 million like we had in 2020 to go out and poke people as hard as we did then. It is what it is. But the national tide of this belief that the economy is a hellscape where the living envy the dead and where everything is terrible and we're on the cusp of doom really was filling up the brains of Republican voters. And they looked at this as an existential challenge, like, I will die, my children will be eaten by illegal immigrants if I don't do this. They're going to trans my children without my permission, all these things. These demons in their heads are imaginary, but it doesn't make them any less tangible to them because they live in this bubble that is impossible for rationality and political discourse to penetrate now. And I don't know where we go as a country because of that at this point. All the complaints every single day, oh, the liberal media this, the mainstream media that. The aggregation of so many right-wing and MAGA media outlets from Fox on down has formed a complete ecosystem. There is nothing like that on the center or the middle or the moderate side or the left at all. Nothing even close. They go, oh, MSNBC. It is dwarfed by Fox. And so that cultural bubble that they built for their audience was far less penetrable, as I said, than we thought. And even though our polling of our people was not based on singularly, traditional polling methods and metrics, there's still a lie factor out there where Republicans and now just do not tell you the truth about what they're going to do in voting. They just don't tell you the truth. They flat out lie.
There's so much they don't tell you there. I think this is a huge point and really close to the core as I've come to see it over the last week. There have been some pretty intelligent commentators that I respect who said, well, what really happened is the Democrats were so focused on trans bathrooms and pronouns, and that's what happened. And that, of course, bears no resemblance whatsoever to the actual campaign that Harris waged. In fact, she ran away from it. So it is this silo. Ecosystem is the perfect word, and the hermetically sealed one as well. So I want to first just put a little exclamation point on what you said. You first said the headwinds were real. And I think as you elaborated, they were real in the sense that they were very real in people's minds. They weren't real factually in the facts of the economy, which were far more, robust and less inflationary than people believed under Biden and far more than under Trump. But what the hell do you do with and now I guess we're pointing forward a little, but this problem of lies and misinformation? On the one hand, you feel a little bit like a school marm. Oh, you really shouldn't lie, and this is so bad, and they're getting away with it. And I think, within Republican circles, they're laughing, at the prissiness of Democrats. But really, you think about, let me stay with you. When you were a Republican, right, that we think of some of the dark arts really coming to the fore with Willie Horton, 1992, Lee Atwater, who repents on his deathbed. At least those were facts presented in a very distorted way. But you had, not just from the mouth of Trump, but from the mouth of the media that, as best I can tell, the vast majority of Trump voters listen to the exclusion of anything else, hammering home constantly simple false assertions, as Trump is so willing to do, and promiscuously. So a two-part question that we could talk for the next 5 hours about. But first, is there anything to be done about that in a democracy? But second, is that not, as we recognized at the time, sort of a first big giant step toward the autocracy that we're all worried about, and states in which there's a party line that comes from the leader that has, and even a sort of official media like Pravda that doesn't care about the truth and yet has a huge impact on people's perceptions of their leaders and the state of their country?
The separate realities, Harry, are the fundamental problem. It's not just two political parties now. It is two cultures that will not and cannot meet, because the incentive structure of one of those cultures is so powerfully oppositional to rationality, to humanity, to science, to generosity, to kindness, to alternate ideas of any kind, that if someone inside that world says, well, maybe Democrat X has a good idea here. Maybe this, way we're approaching something isn't the correct way. We should look at it differently. Maybe we need to do a 7 instead of a 9 on this effort. Those people will be purged from the party almost immediately. They will be thrown into the outer darkness. They understand the incentive structure is performative, oppositional. It has to be a clown show. It has to be a circus. It has to be screaming at the camera. It has to be, oh, our enemies
Trumpian.
Yes, right.
And it's got to be false, Rick. This is the thing that
Yes.
really irked, that I find not just frustrating personally, but like literally what is to be done. There are First Amendment, issues, and media has become entertainment, but literally it's a campaign and now potentially a government run on lies. And, from the everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten, it's just sinful as the day is long. But it does feel to me, maybe this I guess goes back to my original question. maybe there, if you are not going to jump in on the same degree of lies and fight it out dollar for dollar and whose lie wins, knowing that it's two different ecosystems, how literally, I mean, this is something you've thought about a lot with very effective ads and messaging. What do you do to counter lies from sources that much of the country has come to take as uniquely and exclusively reliable?
You have to find ways to subvert their platform. Now that falls into that easier said than done category
Yeah.
meaningfully, but you have to find ways that loop around what they're doing. You have to find ways that interact with their mental construct of the world that challenge them. And we almost got there this year on when Trump went so far about the eating the dogs, eating the cats line.
Yeah.
It almost, because even in our research and our focus groups are like, do you believe that? And people are like, no, it's just a joke. It's just bullshitting. But the fact that it, quote, owned the libs and upset other people made them love it.
Yeah, exactly.
They have embraced a culture of pure lies and pure mendacity all the time. It made them love it. And that idea of it's okay to lie in public discourse, it's okay to be deceptive, it's okay to break faith with other people as long as it causes other people pain. That's not a political philosophy anymore, Harry. It's a pathology in my mind. And I don't know, look, short of some billionaire rolling up and saying, hey, we're gonna start building this. But the Republican right has been building this infrastructure since 2008 when Barack Obama was elected, arguably even before with talk radio. But the cultural impermeability of this bubble has become something that is I would argue that it's a post-COVID effect where that infrastructure and ecosystem became profitable and it became weaponized in ways and targeted in ways that modern digital targeting and AI and everything else has come together to make it really impressively bad.
And false, even though it is the media, the source of information. Yeah.
One more thing here I think is really important to consider. In some ways, we've learned we can't beat that ecosystem, but Trump can. And Trump was defeated in 2020 in large part because the bullshit ecosystem ran into COVID, a real reality. People dead in their homes, people in refrigerator trucks, America in an absolute economic freefall because he screwed it up, because of his incompetence and his malice and his indifference. America encountered something that you couldn't BS away on talk radio or on MAGA websites or on right-wing podcasts. The pain was real and horrifying. Trump is going to do things, I think, that are going to start having a real shock effect on his own people. And even if he does a tenth of what he's promising on tariffs or on immigration or other things, I think we're going to see a really unspinnably bad set of circumstances that start to harm people in the communities they live in. I mean, look, I talked to a guy yesterday, exchanged a couple of emails with him, a Trump supporter, but he's in construction and development down in South Florida. And he said, 50% of my workforce has already disappeared because of DeSantis. And 50% of my workforce is already driving my costs through the roof. He said, I can't hire new people. What am I going to do when they start shipping back entire families? Even if one member is illegal, they start shipping the whole family back. He goes, I'm kind of fucked. I'm like, you voted for the guy. You knew what you were buying.
Well, that's it, of course. And look, I agree. It just so happens that this villainous autocrat also has no policy ideas, no ability to do anything, is motivated only by his own self-interest. So yes, there's a real possibility. I think the tariffs will be disastrous on the economy, and that will matter. But boy, it is so hard to be on the other side of things and saying, well, at least he's going to mess up. And I just want to follow up. I really agree that it not only are you accurate here? But it's sort of in front of our face as the maybe number one organic cause, and to say that and to defeat it are two very different things.
Yeah.
But you talk about facts and unspinnable. Here's a fact that's unspinnable that I gotta think the majority of the American people, including Trump voters, took on, even though Trump doesn't, and it remains one of his agenda items to erase from history. He committed an insurrection in 2021 and tried, in fact, to defeat the peaceful transfer of power, the sine qua non of democracy. Now, I think people knew that. So, we've been saying for months as different things went his way in trials or he got lucky. Okay, it's up to the American people. There is a way in which, right, it wasn't spun. People went to the polls knowing the kind of constitutional villain that he is, and really did decide, yes, oh, that's kind of the stuff of effete elites, and it's just the Constitution, and I really want my milk in price to come down in the supermarket, right? There's something to say about the American people and their judgment of, you could call them competing considerations to us, me, hoity-toity lawyers or whatever. It seems like this, the milk is really got to be secondary, but the American people decided otherwise. Yeah.
The idea in their heads that milk and eggs cost, more than they should, that really, and gas, it really impacted them. That was something they could see, and that Trump successfully linked all the other lies and exaggerations and Munchausen effect to those things that were real. And the administration and the Harris campaign, I got to be blunt on all sides here. When they said things like, well, milk and eggs are more expensive in France, I'm sorry, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
The response was,
it's almost the worst country you could have chosen, I think, for this situation. Yeah.
Right. And look, I think that they needed to address this more broadly and more swiftly, because some of this isn't about, some of the increases in price aren't just inflation. Some of this was corporate, pushing those quarterly reports and wanting to make sure that they were using this moment to maximize their profits. And a lot of that, the administration did not call out or take action on. And, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but here we are.
Should have gone on Joe Rogan, et cetera. That's what I meant by was it winnable. I do think it's right that judgment was taken on board by the American people. And I think Harris tried to just to make it about middle class, but didn't values. And, repeatedly, that's why these assessments by the commentators I would otherwise respect seem so off. But people would now say, in the profession, but didn't forcefully enough rebut transgender in Minnesota bathrooms or whatever, needed to come at it more. But that it's a funny dynamic, because it seems all the time that when there's those sorts of fights, as you've just suggested, the Trump guys want them. They like to be outrageous and even false on those things, and they think they win those mini battles, and the Dems seem to think they win them, and somebody had to be wrong, right? And I think the Trump instincts were accurate. Yeah.
I mean, Donald Trump is not a smart man.
It's really so true and shouldn't be forgotten. Yeah.
He's not a brilliant strategist. He's not some sort of deep intellect political mastermind. Donald Trump has a feral instinct for the Republican base. He owns it. He built it. He's molded it over. You can make an argument he molded it starting when The Apprentice was on for 15 years or whatever it was.
Yeah.
15 or 16 years, I guess. Because I started seeing that back in 2014 in focus groups. You'd ask people like, why are you voting for Donald Trump? And they would say, he's the richest man in the world. He built every building in Manhattan. He is incorruptible. He has all the money he ever needs. He doesn't care about money. He's a businessman. He's got great judgment. He's an executive. And it was all, again, a lie. Every bit of it was a lie. And yet that image has started to shape the Republican base even back then. The reason he was playing the games about Obama's birth certificate, was because he was building a political image, whether he knew it or not. That feral cunning that Trump has is really, really powerful. And it is something that the base continues to respond.
Allied to the media ecosystem, a
Right.
whole
You
different,
build those two things, and it doesn't matter. Well, I've learned, it doesn't matter what you said to folks. You know, he's going to restrict the rights of many millions of Americans. It's going to hurt you directly and personally. It's going to trash the economy. It's going to be a one-way ratchet to authoritarianism we can't unwind and undo.
That's the biggest question, right?
He should have been disqualified 100 different ways.
That's right. All right. And I do want to move to that, but we have a little bit of a conflicting strain here among people who say, if you believe what you've just said, Rick, what we did wrong, and the recriminations and the firing squad that's happening just seem secondary, but of course, political reality is political reality. So you were still in the fold, I think, in 2012 when Romney's loss occasioned
For sure.
a sort of summit from Republicans, and they took
Oh,
it
yeah.
as what do we do now? Hakeem Jeffries is assembling the caucus for what is certainly sounding like, from the press reports, a kind of a hair shirt session of oy vey smear, what do we do to rebuild. So what if you were the guest speaker, doing the keynote at the Dem private meeting there,
Right.
not for reporting, what would you be trying to focus their attention on?
Stop looking over your left shoulder at the progressives. Because what did they prove to you this year? They don't fucking care if you win or lose. They don't care if you win or lose. All the garbage they put the party through and Harris through about Gaza, and the decisive number of Democrats who voted for Jill Stein in Michigan because of Gaza.
It was decisive, and this is news to me.
Yep.
Holy.
In our model, we saw progressive and Arab Democrats made up enough of the vote that killed her in Michigan. If these people, if the Democratic Party doesn't realize that the progressives are not their ally, that they are a competing party inside their party, just like the Republican Party didn't realize MAGA was going to consume them. And look, I'll get a lot of shit for this from progressives. The AOC will tweet mean things about me, whatever. I am a practical politics guy.
Right.
I am not an ideologue. I'm not a pie in the sky, whatever. I believe in victory. And if you don't have victory against Donald Trump and his allies in the 2026 cycle, goodbye. It's over. They need to learn how to be a fighting party. They need to go at the throat all the time. They need to never show mercy to these people. There's no more my honorable friend in the House or the Senate. They need to go to war every single day to stop every Trump appointee. They need to try to stop every Trump policy. They need to drag it. They need to spin it. They need to work it all the time. Eric Swalwell has it right. You've got to go to war with these people because they are at war with you. The second big thing I would tell them is enough of your Moneyball fantasy bullshit that you can test your way out of every problem. Sometimes you have to communicate with voters where they're at, where their guts and their heart and their soul and their head are. And sometimes you have to realize that the heart beats the head in politics over and over and over again, and they don't get it. The issue this year on the trans ads, they aired that ad over 30,000 times to white.
The Republicans did.
Yes,
It was brutally effective, right? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And we gave them an ad at one point because there was panic inside parts of the campaign. Like, what do we do? What do we do?
You knew right away, Rick, this one is really dangerous.
Yeah, I knew it right away. And friends of friends reached out. So we made some spots. We made one in particular. And we heard back, it didn't test well. It moved the voters that we needed to move, but it had a blowback score. And that blowback score meant that we would get shit from trans people and from our progressive allies that we were saying something. And it wasn't an attack on trans people, it was an attack on Trump, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But it wasn't sufficiently sensitive to the internal dynamics of the party. And I put my head in my hands about it. And Joe Scarborough and I talked about it on the air.
Yeah.
And everybody was beating the drum like, you've got to fight back on this issue. And it was a cultural wedge that they wouldn't.
I see. Because when as I looked at the surface of the campaign, it was not very woke. It was not driven by the
No, not at
progressives.
all.
But you knowing better the mechanics and internal dynamics, there were ways in which that progressive wing actually made them stay their hand when they shouldn't have. Is that?
Their fear of their left flank
Mm,
is infinite. And if they don't overcome that, Harry, oh, look, and I'm not saying that they should be a Republican light. There's a huge space in the Democratic Party for effective campaigning and governance. Bill Clinton, we had three Republican presidents in a row
right.
when Bill Clinton won. How did Bill Clinton win? Bill Clinton won by being a non-traditional Democrat. He was able to win states in the South, which at the time were considered out of reach because he was a non-traditional Democrat. He was able, you end up with Barack Obama, who runs after two Bush terms. He's able to exploit an economic window of crisis after the '08 financial crisis and the Gulf War and the Iraq War that left America ready for something different. But Barack Obama, for all that Republicans framed him out as a radical Marxist, Kenyan socialist, all that garbage,
Yeah.
when you listen to him speak, he came across like a country club Republican. These are things that Democrats need to understand. Ditch the radical talk, ditch the progressive fantasy world. Stop thinking that you have to go out and campaign to talk to workers about industrial policy and solar panel jobs. Start talking to them where they live. The Moneyball approach to politics, the scanning of every word and hoping that nobody will be offended by a single thing, or the reality of understanding where America really is. Because I'll tell you something, you know what? You know why they lost black men? Because black men are not comfortable with the trans stuff, and they beat that ad into their head.
And by the way, the message that you're saying is the natural democratic message about, inequality and the fortunes
Correct.
of the working class and the working poor.
There's a thing that Reed Galen says. He says if you got three guys out working on a road crew on a 100-degree day in the summer, and there's a black guy, a white guy, and a Hispanic guy, and the woman in the Land Rover drives by and throws her Starbucks cup out of the window, they all hate her.
All right, let's stick with that a little bit because, and again, just the facts. I agree. I think many sensible people, the vast majority, agree with the opposition to the woke extremity, and there is some odd kind of inheritance of the importance and grandeur of the civil rights era and some kind of guilt involved. But keeping that to the side, it is a fact, though, isn't it? When you're factoring that in, we had an African American woman from the Bay Area, right? And but that, of course, the Dems knew all the time, and there was an exciting element to that. But just as a fact of the matter, do you have a sense of whether she started in a hole based on just vestigial antipathy toward minorities, toward women, that was just harder to get out of than people calculated?
It was a hole that was difficult to crawl out of. Look, and we can go back and woulda, coulda, shoulda the process of whether Joe Biden should have gotten out earlier or at all. Or there's a million counterfactuals there. But I will say this: I don't want to dismiss her campaign completely. She ran in 100 days an extraordinary campaign.
Impeccable, right? Yeah,
I
we
mean,
think.
didn't really set a foot wrong except one or two little fumbles. Like the time she was asked, like, what would you do differently than Biden? She said nothing. That was not great, but for the most part, it was a very good campaign, very well run and well done. But those headwinds in the culture, the economy, the media infrastructure, all those things are absolutely, when you look at them in the clarity of hindsight, they were all there, and they were all gonna be difficult to overcome.
Yeah, well, I mean, in some sense, impossible. She was who she was, and that had a lot of advantages as well. All right, so Rick, let's do a full pivot now toward what's coming up. And you've laid out, I mean, you've laid out over the last, as have I, as of so many people, year or two, the dangers we would encounter, and now, boom, we are here. for me as a nerdy elite lawyer, the prospect that you raise that seems very real of a decline that is not easily or maybe not at all reversible toward autocracy is by far the most chilling. Though I'd also like to talk about what the hell is it going to look like in this country when they try to deport 1 million people? What actual cost will there be at the kitchen table of middle class and working poor when they institute tariffs? But let me focus on the decline toward autocracy and the real possibility that the American experiment is eroded. I mean, I don't think we're looking at a Stalin Mao model, but we may well be looking at, let's just say, a Hungary model. What do you think will be the kind of canaries in the coal mine? And there is a world in which it's crazy people in there, but we emerge in 4 years with the institutions having held. And there's a real world in which we emerge with them substantially weakened in a way that just can't easily be reversed. What are you looking at? What do you see from the signs of the appointees that, from the first week and the whole rhetorical stance of the Team Trump? Bannon today basically made an argument in New York courts. The people have decided all this. My crime should just be forgotten. Keeping with the lens of decline toward autocracy, what should we be looking carefully at?
Our warning signs are already flashing red alert sirens. When we saw the Supreme Court give Donald Trump essentially a get out of jail free forever card, with where anything that can be said to even have the most ephemeral and tangential connection to his official duties is now do whatever he wants. I mean, they've given him essentially unlimited executive ambit, and that is incredibly dangerous. How he starts to use that piece of legal cover and armor as he starts to deploy these executive orders, as he starts to take actions that are not permitted under law, that will be where we're going to really have an understanding that there are no guide rails, there are no guardrails, there are no guideposts, there are no norms and institutions. Who's going to stop him is the question, because the court is not going to stop him. This court, they've shown us time and again, they give him a level of deference that is beyond anything we could have expected. I don't think you're going to see, although we saw a small thing as we were doing this show, John Thune is going to be the Senate Majority Leader. Mitch McConnell has, as his parting gift to Trump, put one of his acolytes in charge of the Senate. Now, I don't think Thune is going to be a voice of public opposition to Trump, but he may slow things down. He may clamp down on some of the more egregious excesses Trump has in mind. But we're also going to see, I think, guys like Bannon, they're not satisfied just with the processes of government. They're going to try to use threats, intimidation, and violence, I believe, to try to engage Trump's enemies as he sees them from day to day. I think we're going to see a massive amount of lawfare waged by the Republican Party in the House against their critics.
Okay, can you flesh that out a little? You mean like hearings against Jack Smith or
right.
Jim
hearings
Jordan?
Against Jack Smith, hearings against Joe Biden. They're not going to give up on Biden and the Biden family. They're going to drag Jim Comey back out there. They're going to drag generals in front of committees and interrogate them about wokeness in the military. They're going to do a lot of things, I think, that are going to be very much outside the boundary layer that we thought were possible. Look, I mean, and I can tell you the lawfare stuff is no fun. Mike Flynn sued me almost 2 years ago for $10 million. I've been fighting it for 2 years. It's cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's absurd. He's going to get it. He's going to lose in the end, but they're just.
But you can afford it although it really hurts. Jack Smith, a lifetime public servant who's done nothing wrong.
Government employees are going to be able to say, "Oh yeah, I can write a $50,000 check to my lawyer every few months." That's not easy for folks that they're going to target, and they're going to look to make examples of people that they think they can bully and intimidate. And the purpose of going after a Jack Smith or a Jim Comey or Christopher Wray or whomever it becomes is to intimidate the next guy. and the next guy, and the next guy, and the next
Yeah,
guy.
that's what is this their agenda for they of course are thinking of consolidating power and making this the dawn of a whole Trump era. So that's the political agenda, or is it just more, nasty reprisal third grade stuff?
There's a political motivation behind it, and that political motivation, I think, is incredibly dark. They will, some of it is to own the libs, but a lot of it is to actually set up a framework for intimidation and the breaking of any opposition inside government going forward.
Okay. And look, power is as power does, but now the same kind of thing we talked about with Jeffries. You're now Adam Schiff, or you're now Jamie Raskin. In other words, a voice that at least is able to reach out directly to some Americans. Focused still on this autocracy idea, is there anything, let's say that they Trump stumbles, and there's as we kind of expect him to, and things change, at least with the House, say in 2 years. So then it's a new day. Are these 2 years, however, just a matter of sitting back and taking it? What rhetorical, political, media strategy
Right.
can the minorities? Yeah.
Silence is assent. Okay. You
Yeah.
have to oppose him publicly, vocally, aggressively. Authoritarians depend on intimidating people into silence. They depend on intimidating people into saying, yeah, I don't want to get hauled before a committee. I don't want to get
Right.
investigated. I don't want to get my taxes audited. I don't want to get this or that. All those things are going to happen to people anyway if they don't fight him. So you've got to be in the fight. I believe me, Harry, believe me, I wanted Harris to win. I wanted to go write more books. I wanted to go fly airplanes. I wanted to raise my
Exactly.
granddaughter. I wanted to do all these things, to get married to my fiance. I wanted to do all these things that were human things again, but we're in a fight with an inhuman movement. And that movement is not just, and this is where the media really, really misses the point. That movement is not just about R's and D's, left and right. It's about freedom versus authoritarianism and autocracy. And if we don't wake up, if we don't focus on this, we are in a world of hurt.
Yeah, I think there's an end, Rick, although I'll just say it's so, when you think of the countries that we could be sliding toward, the people there, I think they're marked more by apathy, in a sense that you just can't do anything. So they live their lives and let injustice reign, as it were. And I do think that's what we're looking at. And as you say, there's a lot of things. You play a really important role. The American people do as well. And there's a certain, especially now, sense of anticipatory, like, exhaustion. Oh
Yeah.
man, for friggin' yeah. But I tend to agree that people who, at least like you, but like Jamie Raskin, like Adam Schiff, who at least can reach out to some, even if then Fox pillories them or caricatures them, there's really sort of no way around the kind of week to week or month to month focus, even losing a lot to just try. Because I think I'll go back to where I think very trenchantly started, which is the huge problem of trying to make headway when the media ecosystem that the bare majority of the country listens to is so hard to make permeable.
It's a tough assignment, and it's one that we're gonna have to keep fighting on. And to quote the TV show Firefly, might have been on the losing side. Not convinced it was the wrong one.
So glad you're there. Thank you so much for your time. Hope to be talking to you.
Thank you, my friend. I will talk to you again soon.
Yeah, let me tell people who are there and listening. We've got Talking San Diego, the great Rick Wilson, and I think his colleague Stuart Stevens, we're talking about it now, will be here to meet and talk about some of these things in person. That'll be a really exciting day for us in San Diego. Really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, Harry, thanks again. We'll see you soon.
See you soon, Rick. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to One on One, a weekly conversation series from Talking Feds. If you like what you've heard, please tell a friend to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever they get their podcasts, and please take a moment to rate and review this podcast. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube, where we post full episodes, talking books, and bonus video content. Talking Feds remains one of the very few independent productions out there, so if you like the work we do and are inclined to support the show, joining our Patreon is the best way to do it. Plus, you'll get tons of perks like free access to my LA Times op-eds and the chance to join monthly live Q&A sessions. Thanks for tuning in, and don't worry, as long as you need answers, the Feds will keep talking. Talking Feds One-on-One is produced by Catherine Devine, associate producer Gabriella Glick, sound engineering by Matt McArdle, Rosie Dawn Griffin, Hamza Mehendranathan, David Lieberman, and Emma Maynard are our contributing writers. Production assistance by Akshaj Turbailu and Genesis Magpayo. Our music, as ever, is by the amazing Philip Glass. Talking Feds is a production of Delito LLC. I'm Harry Littman. Talk to you later.